Life can simply just be hard and troublesome. And one of the things that really causes a lot of this is just our plain human nature. And it would be too easy to blame this on something called original sin. And it would be too easy just to bracket it and say it is our sin. Psychologists really help us to formulate what our human nature is all about. And at the heart, we have animalistic instincts that drive us that can often be destructive. Sure, at sometimes our instincts, our intuition, our gut can help us, but most often it actually hurts us because we've been designed to actually use our brain for reason and reflection. So often when something bad happens, we find fault in others. Finding fault is an animalistic instinct. We also are fearful of others or of situations, another instinct. And the third major instinct that really sort of describes our human nature is that we so easily get frustrated. We find fault, we find fear, and we find frustration in so many things. But researchers have also helped us identify more specific and nuanced instincts that actually hurt our ability to reason and to get along and to have a peaceful world. One of those is the gap instinct. And a gap instinct basically says there's two types of people. There's us and them. That's too narrow. That's generalization. And actually generalization is another instinctual behavior. It's so prehistoric and it can get us into a lot of trouble. We also have a propensity to be negative, and negativity is an instinct that we sort of like gravitate toward the bad news. And our culture does well to help us with that because it's hard to find good news. These instincts of fault and fear and frustration, generalization, negativity, the gap instinct, they surround us. We have this destiny instinct that is really troublesome right now today. And that is that because of our religion, our race, our heritage, whatever, we somehow feel like we are destined, or people say we are destined for one track. That is such a destructive instinct and animalistic behavior. We are in Lent, and Lent is a time to journey toward Easter, the resurrection of Jesus, the way that Jesus transforms us. The most early Christians, the postulants of the church, before Easter, they would prepare for baptism and study the doctrines and the theology of the church and the teachings of Jesus. So this Lent, we're going through a series that we're called Amazed by His Teachings, because Jesus has a lot to teach us by the words He says and the actions that He lived. And one of the things that He taught us was to avoid those gut instincts. He gave us clear instructions in Luke's gospel to do 4 things that are the opposite of a gut feeling, the opposite of being instinctual. The first is to do good to those who aren't good to us. That is far from our instinctual behavior. The second is that we have to bless those who curse us. Again, it is so contrary to our animalistic behaviors. Third, we need to pray for those who mistreat us. And the fourth is that golden rule: do to others the way you would have them do to you. Because Jesus calls us to live a different life in this world. That yes, the world is hostile. The world is full of animalistic behaviors. The world is full of hate and tragedy and oppression. But we are called to live to a different standard, to take the higher road. A disciple is not called to live by our animalistic instincts, our gut feelings, what our body tells us. We're not called to live by finding fault. We're not called to live by finding frustration. We're certainly not called to live into the fears of our lives. To the contrary, we're called to do good to those who aren't good to us. The calls that Jesus gives us are an invitation to break into a countercultural cycle to the hostility of this world. That we're to bring peace in a world that is full of hate. That we're to bring hope in a world that is full of despair. Because this is, after all, how Jesus lived, how Jesus taught, and how Jesus continues to call us. And yes, it is a recipe for disaster. Because when we're good to those who aren't good to us, Bad things are going to happen to us. We are bringing good into the world, but the negativity does come back to us. When we pray for those who persecute us, we pray for those who mistreat us, we'll get called out on it. But that is what Jesus has called us to do. Because when we are bringing peace into a world of hate, we are being countercultural. Because this is what we're made for. We're made to be so much better than our instincts. Our genuine nature is to live into the call that Jesus gives us. To be created and inspired and motivated to live by the words and the calls of Jesus is difficult and challenging, but it is what it is. Jesus calls us and reminds us the next time we want to find fault in someone, let's look at finding fault in ourselves. The next time we feel fearful in a situation, let's step back and try to reflect on what is really making us afraid. And the next time we want to get frustrated at something, or we naturally, instinctually get frustrated, let's hold back, hold the anger, and pray for those who mistreat us.